everyone, I'm Riada, and this is Dignified Resilience, a podcast on fresh narratives on confronting despair, alleviating distress, and forging ahead. In this podcast, we hear from people around the globe at all stages of life and variety of industries, and learn how to channel dignified resilience to survive, feed the soul to heal, and connect with others through inspiring compassionate actions and behavior. At the same time, I aim to grow a global conversation that seeks to better acknowledge different socio-cultural perspectives on meaningfully weathering life's adversities and achieving well-being. Here is a noble and humane invitation for surpassing our old selves by learning about and from other people's moving forces and limitations for successfully overcoming affliction and ache. Remember, we have different lives, distinct pathways, cultures, and contexts, but we can find common ground in supporting dignified resilience anywhere. So let's go then. Hello everyone, this is Riada. Welcome to Dignified Resilience. Our today's guest is a woman whom I have admired immensely ever since I discovered her. She's an incredibly inspiring leader who works tirelessly. And I also learned this because we've been trying to get together and find a time that worked for both of us for quite a while. So I'm very honored that Wai Wai Nu accepted and found time in her busy schedule to be my conversational companion. Wai Wai and her family belong to the Rohingya minority, a severely oppressed and marginalized people in Rakhine state in Myanmar. In fact, the United Nations has described the Rohingya as the most persecuted minority in the world. In Myanmar, the nation does not seem to extend beyond the ethnic Burmese Buddhist majority. Other minorities have been targeted as well, including Rakhine Buddhists in Western Burma. But the Muslim minorities have felt horrific persecution, Rohingya feeling the most severe one. They are perceived by many as foreign illegal immigrants, very derogatorily called Bengali, and they have lived in Rakhine for generations, since as early as the 12th century, according to many historians and Rohingya groups. We'll talk more about that. But before we continue to history and politics, I first want to note, Wai Wai herself is a source of tremendous inspiration, and she has shared her tough experiences loudly, intentionally, and clearly on numerous media platforms throughout the years, thus inspiring with her own resilience generations of people from all geographical contexts. She is a former political prisoner and the co-founder of Justice for Women. She holds a law degree from Yangon East University and Masters of Laws from UC Berkeley. She is also the founder and director of the Women Peace Network Arakan, and her work is focused towards women empowerment, peace building, and reduction of discrimination in her country. She will tell us about her work herself, but I want to remind that I want to highlight personal journeys of these incredibly brave leaders who accept to be guests on my podcast. These things don't come easy or at once, and I am all in awe by the bravery and the courage with which they come forward to share their stories. Before I greet Wai Wai, I want to add that she was also selected as a World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader in 2018. She has been named as a next generation leader by Time magazine in 2017. She was recognized as one of the 100 world thinkers by Foreign Policy in 2015. She was listed as one of 100 top women by BBC in 2014, and the list goes on and on. So I'm so honored and privileged that you are here and that you found time to come to Dignified Resilience, Wai Wai. I want to say welcome, and how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much to speak about right now, especially with, as I said, your personal story, which I think we could start with. You, in 2005, at age 18, if I'm correct, right when you were starting law school, you were told you were going to prison, but basically your crime was being a daughter of Kyon Min, who is a pro-democracy activist and school teacher from Rakhine State, right?
Yes.
What happened, and how did you end up in prison with your siblings as well?
Yeah. So in addition to my father's political involvement in Burmese democracy movement, he was actually a close political ally for current state councillor, head of the de facto head, the leader of the state now, Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi. And he was actually an elected parliamentarian in 1990 election. So, he had been involved since the revolutions in 1988 in Myanmar, the pro-democracy student revolutions. He'd been involved in politics since then and on, and up to up until now. But then during those period, he basically become an ally to the Aung San Suu Kyi, and therefore he was targeted by the military regime, and he was arrested in early 2005. And then, after 2 months later, they came to arrest the rest of the family members, and we came to realize that it was solely because we were Rohingya. So even then, when I was on trial, it was a closed trial. It was inside the prison. Our court itself was inside the prison, and it was a closed trial. We didn't have legal counsel, legal representations for our trial, and it was very short and closed trial. Even then, I was hoping that they would release the family members and they will keep my dad. But then, the judge announced that we've been sentenced for 17 years, and my father has been sentenced. My father, was sentenced for 47 years. So it shocked me, and I still had hope that they would release with us, with pardon after a few months. I waited for 3 months and 6 months, and then on and on. And it never came. It wasn't true. They basically, hated us, and they basically targeted us specifically because we were Rohingya. The whole family was put in jail and destroy our futures and our life just because we were Rohingya. And that's where I realized they're not going to release me. And at the end, it was in 2011 where we have the regime change. So we have the military leader, transform themselves to become civilian elected leader. So we had the first elections after about 20 years, and then we had a sort of change in the country. And after that, in 2012, we've been given pardon along with other 623 political prisoners.
You were not able to go to school for years. I've read in several interviews that now you refer to that period of your life as University of Life. And you very openly spoke how it was that incarceration that politicized you because of not just the experiences, but the observations that you had made by spending time with many women in the prison. Would you share some of those with us, please?
Yes. So it was really, for me, it was extremely sad and difficult to cope with the conditions in the prison, as well as the notion that you are put in prison and you are being treated as a criminal, although without committing any crimes. And also the notion that you're supposed to go to the school, the law school, to study laws, but you are unjustly imprisoned, and destroy your future. So I almost lost my faith in laws and rules, rule of laws, and with everything. But then I started to talk with many other women in the prison. They are from. I was one of the youngest, but there are other girls and women from 18 to older women. but mostly when I talk to the younger one, I realized that, at least as individuals, for myself, I knew what is happening to me. But most of them, they didn't even know what was going on with them. For example, they've been put in prison. Most of them have been put in prison for minor crimes, and they've been a victim of this social economic status of the family members. For example, let's say when they gamble in their city or in their street or in the village, they were simply doing this because they need to feed their children or their family members, because they don't have a good economy, and so they have to do this very small kind of business at home, which is like gambling, lottery, in localized lottery programs. When they do that, the police and the authorities arrest those people in the ground rather than addressing systemic challenge or big gamblers on top of over there. But these are they simply do it not because they want to do bad thing. And of course, it's not bad thing in many countries and in many contexts. The gambling is legal. But there, you're put in jail just because you want to feed your, children or your families. And let's say when they are prostitute, most girls I talk with, they didn't want to do those work. They didn't want to become a sex worker, but they left no choice, with no education, no family support, no opportunity, no employment, and but this is the only option that remained for them, and they become the victims of exploitations and even being arrested. And at the end, when I talk to them, I realize they don't even know how to have a future, most of them, and they didn't even go to the school. And I realized I was luckier than most of them. And then I started to calm down myself and try to see bigger pictures. Started to dig into deeper and deeper to understand life of the people in the country. And that's how I said it was my life education. And apart from that, I met with many women political prisoners, from generations, from the older generation to younger generations, and that was really intense to learn their life and their struggle. I was very young when I was put in jail. I wasn't really politically involved very deeply. Although my father was a politician, so I was aware of the situations, but I didn't understand their struggle. So I came to realize how difficult the struggle was throughout this military repression. So, and that was one other, reason. And beyond that, I was actually, I had a very good relationship with the prison, with some of the prison staffs and officers. And actually, once I become friend with one officer in our cell, and I asked her, I realized, the prisoners has been treated very unfairly, and sometimes they've been tortured, abused by the prison staffs and among the prisoners. And the living condition, the food, the water, drinking water, the way they had to take the procedures of taking showers, and all of these things are really, felt like there is no dignity. And I thought there was something wrong. And I make friends with these prison officers, and I asked her to give me a prison manual, to share me the prison manual. And then she shared me prison manual saying that, I cannot be public about it. And then I have to return as soon as I finish reading. And although I didn't have papers and pen, I wasn't allowed to have papers and pen to write down notes. But I still skim the whole prison book and read the important sections that required. The prison manual was actually very old British colonial manual book, very outdated, but yet there are some rights that prisoners are, given. For example, as pregnant women or political prisoners, 7 categories of the prisoners has special rights than others. Sick people, like that, different at least 7 categories. And at the same time, some of the standard that has been exist from the British colonial time are not really relevant to the current time. So I read the prison book and I started to call, I and other, political prisoners in the prison and other female, started to talk about our ration, like food ration, proportions of the food, the water availability or accessibility of the water. So, at the beginning, we were only allowed to have 3 to 5 big cups of water to take shower, and we said this doesn't make sense. We need personal hygiene and we need enough adequate water to take shower for our personal hygiene. Stuff, very small thing like that. We started to talk inside, and then it was kind of, I didn't realize how big was it. Finally, we were able to abolish most of these very inhumane policies and standards that put in place in the prison. And that's how I said, this is my university of life university. My prison experience is.
That is incredible, Wai Wai. Thank you for sharing that. You've been doing an incredible job through the Women Peace Network to continue building peace and mutual understanding and to fight for human rights of Rohingya and to empower the women throughout Myanmar, particularly in Rakhine State, and advocate for their rights. So before we continue, I think maybe I should just give a little bit of complicated historical background to the oppression of Rohingya for our listeners. In a very shortly, close to 1 million Rohingya had fled to neighboring Bangladesh when, in August 2017, Myanmar's military launched what it called a clearance operation in Rakhine State in response to an attack by a Rohingya armed group. But Myanmar has a history, a long one, of one of the world's most brutal military regimes. So I think it's important to know that while the news about the oppression of the Rohingya might have been out in the international media in the last few years, we're actually talking about decades-long, severe, systematic oppression, deprivation of nationality, restriction of freedom of movement, sexual violence, and a severe lack of freedom to practice religion or access to healthcare, education, and housing. So we're talking about, mid-60s, and since then, slowly, since the late 70s, actually, thousands and thousands of Rohingya have fled Myanmar due to widespread persecution, right? And then we have, in the 1982, they have a lot of them. They have been denied citizenship in Myanmar since 1982, which has effectively rendered them stateless. Under that law, Rohingya were again not recognized as one of the country's 135 ethnic groups. So I think the timing of my conversation with Wai Wai is quite pertinent, considering that we have, in November 2019, Gambia brought official case at the International Court of Justice alleging that Myanmar committed genocide against the Rohingya, which of course the government staunchly denies. They have blamed violence in Rakhine State and ensuing military crackdowns on terrorist groups and terrorism. So I want to ask you, Wai Wai, first, in January 2020, we have the Hague-based court issuing a provisional order asking Myanmar to protect the Rohingya in Western Rakhine State under the scope of provisional measures, so-called, at the start of that trial expected to take years. What are your thoughts on the fact that on May 23rd, Myanmar submitted its first report to the International Court of Justice detailing what it has done to, quote unquote, protect the minority Rohingya from genocide? What are your thoughts on that? And what is the situation on the ground, actually? Is the military continuing to wage war in ethnic minority states? What's going on?
That's true. The military continue to persecute ethnic minorities and target the Rohingya in the ground in Rakhine state. And the government of Myanmar continue to practice the policies, genocidal policies that has been introduced by the military leaderships over the last few decades. The Burmese a government now, democratically elected government, continuing those policy against the Rohingya. So basically what that means is the people in Rakhine state still does not have full citizenship rights or citizenship or any documents to travel outside of their villages, outside of their camps, or to travel to other cities or townships or states. So that's the lack of documentations make them extremely vulnerable to have access to any livelihood and social economic rights. For example, they cannot go to the school. The Rohingya students are still barred from being to the school since 2012, where the Rohingya were violently attacked from the first place, as the first time over the last during the last several years, and they have basically extremely difficult access in terms of when it's come to access to the healthcare. My grandmother herself cannot have any access to healthcare. She lives in the village, but she cannot go to the city to have to get the medical treatment. She has a major problem with her stomach, and she's been suffering from stomach ache for many months now. And she cannot go to the hospital. And even, let's say, even if she's allowed to go at some point, by bribing or by getting permissions or whatsoever, at some point, even if she's going to able to go to the hospital, she doesn't have, they don't have enough doctors and medical support equipment for the Rohingya, where the mainly Rohingya lives. In Butidong Township, where about 300,000 people live, we have only one doctor at a city hospital. So that's the situations. So the deprivations of healthcare, deprivations of education, livelihoods, economic opportunities, let alone economic opportunities and employment. They cannot even do small businesses or small business activities to feed their families. Going out for fishing or to the farm can be a crime. So that's how the conditions is continue to be in Rakhine state. And with the ICJ, yes, the Myanmar government has submitted the report to the submission to the ICJ on May 22nd, according to the International Court of Justice website. But we haven't seen the actual document yet, so we don't know what they have actually submitted. But what I can tell from our experience and observations and monitoring is that, as I said, the Burmese government is continue to practice all these genocidal practices and policies against the Rohingya populations. There is no changes. Nothing has changes in the ground since January, when the provisional measures were ordered by the court. There has not been any changes in the ground. So that's what I can say.
And the situation now, additionally, with the global pandemic, brings all this into a more threatening environment for people who are left within Rakhine State in Myanmar, correct? And then in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So my next question was, up to your knowledge, how is the COVID-19 currently impacting the community? I've read that on May 15, 10 days ago, there are local officials saying that entire block in one camp, housing about 5,000 people, was shut off after a confirmed case. Mm-hmm. So can aid organizations come in? Of course, social distancing is a luxury in these camps as well. And then what's going on in terms of that? I've read also Azim Ibrahim from Center for Global Policy in DC, who is an expert on the matter and author of several policy papers related recently said that about 200,000 Rohingya could be killed by COVID-19 due to the overcrowded living conditions and limited access to medical supplies. What is your knowledge regarding that right now?
Yeah, so that's true. There are different speculations and calculations, research have been done how the COVID-19 could impact the Rohingya in Bangladesh in refugee camps. And last week we have the first cases of COVID-19 has found in the camps, and now we've seen more and more cases, daily basics. We're not in the peak point anywhere yet, but there will be a time, and it is very concerning. Yeah, it could be 200 or it could be 500 based on some other researches. However, for me, what is the most concerning and terrifying thing is that they've been under lockdown for more than a month, almost 2 months now. And people are basically saying that we are not going to die from the COVID-19, but we are going to die from hunger and starvations, because people cannot go out and find food or go to the market and get enough nutrition that they need. There are NGOs there like UNHCR and other big NGOs, but they only provide like rice, beans, and oil, and that's not enough. That's not enough, and that's where people are really the frustrations of the refugees, and that is something that is urgent to address. And so I think the COVID-19 response in developed world should be, the COVID-19 response in this context of the, very squalid, crowded, highly densely populated refugee camps should be very, should be different from how the COVID response in let's say in United States or in developed world, because the needs and the contextual backgrounds and the living conditions of the people are very different from what we have here. So there is a special attention required to address and to help these populations to save their life.
We should add that in terms of climate as well, this is a tricky part of the year because of the monsoon season, right, which lasts from April through October, and it's bringing a significant rainfall that could trigger landslides and floods. And this is additional problem in overcrowded tents. And then I read recently there were fires happening. There's so many challenges, and one specific one that I also wanted to ask you, which this one's not natural disaster, is I've read that right groups and others have criticized Bangladesh for cutting internet access in the camp. And the authorities say that from what I've gathered, it's to combat drug trafficking and other alleged criminal activities. But I do want to ask you, what are the consequences of a lockdown of internet in the camps as well?
Yeah, so you're right. So there have been flood and heavy rain causes landslided. People tent are destroyed, and luckily we don't have people died from the recent landslide. And in addition to that, we have 2 times campfire over the last 2 weeks, and more than 700 tents of houses has been destroyed, and there is urgency, the extreme protections need. And at the same time, the internet limitations or locked internet blackout has been there for so long. Only in some places has very limited access to the internet, and that's put the situations of refugee more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. because that increase actually fears among the populations, where they are getting informations and what could happen to them. All of these frustrations could increase and fear can increase, and that may cause other problems in responding COVID-19, obviously. At the same time, when you don't have information, it's you're like you don't have ears and eyes, you know nothing. And obviously we do believe that clearly it doesn't actually stop the human traffickers or drug dealer when you don't have internet. So I think it is extremely important that the Bangladesh government reopen the internet access to the camp, and give them a chance, allow them to have access to information, respect their rights to information.
Yeah, and before we get to the question of the response either by West or ASEAN, I also have learned that additional challenges that we know that there have been hundreds of Rohingya rescued by the Bangladesh in early May, who, after floating adrift in the Bay of Bengal and sent to Bashanchar Island, which is flood prone, after being stranded at sea for a couple of weeks. And then we have the UN Secretary General saying that they should be moved to existing refugee camps. So what is going on with that as well? We have people trying to go to Malaysia as well, and now a group of them stranded on this island. People trying to risk everything and anything, right?
Yeah, so basically it starts from Myanmar. The people have been trying to risk their life. They've been saying that it's better to die on the sea than on the hands of Burmese military or Burmese government. And so therefore they've been taking risks to take this horrendous journey to go to a safer place. There has been boat going on since like 1998, 99, and it's ongoing until now. I mean, there are boats that coming out from Rakhine State. Also, there are boats coming out, going out from Bangladesh refugee camps as well. Mainly because the living conditions in Bangladesh refugee camps is very poor, very really bad, and it's as we described earlier, living in very small plastic tent, very small plastic squalid tents, and they have no futures and no opportunities in the camps apart from waiting for what NGOs are going to give you, which is rice, beans, and oil every day. So people, trying to survive and taking this journey, since there is no proper procedures by the in Myanmar, by the Bangladesh government for any kind of resettlement to the third country. Many refugees want to settle to the third country because some of them, they may have their family members in Malaysia or in other countries, since they have fled earlier on, and they may want to have a family reunion, or or they don't want to go back to Myanmar where their family members, their loved ones, their children, their husband are being killed. They don't, where they have witnesses, their houses burned by this brutal attack. They may not want to go back home, so they need another form of solutions. So there should be resettlement processes and procedures by the Bangladesh government. Since those are not exist in the in Bangladesh, these people are taking risks by this boat, and most of the time we will see the news of boat drowning, or being die from hunger, or at some point they had to drink their own urine because there's no water available on the boat, and women are being abused and sexually abused by these traffickers, and all of this tragedy is unending. And yet, recently we have seen that the Malaysia and other neighboring country didn't allow them to disembark. And then they have to return and stranded on this Bay of Bengal. And finally, they were sent to this Bashangsha Island. And this is not not the world. This is not what we supposed to be doing to help address this crisis. This will be again an unending, recurrence and unending suffering. We need a stronger solutions from Burmese government, from Bangladesh government, and from international community. We need to end this suffering. It's suffering after sufferings. We need to end this with a stronger actions, by restoring the rights of the Rohingya in Myanmar. It's about restoring dignity and equal rights in Myanmar. What we're simply looking for is that equal rights, equal citizenship in Myanmar. We're not asking for something too much, but we are simply asking our basics, fundamental human rights, and which is a dignified living conditions with equal rights. And this is something that the world can help restore us. And there is no political will. That's why we're not seeing any solutions, and we are basically witnessing an ending sufferings of the human beings.
So far, it seems that Myanmar's leaders have not felt like there is enough pressure, I guess, to stop the operations. Myanmar is often shielded by China at the UN Security Council, and international rights experts are kind of criticizing the ASEAN as well for failing to take action for resolving this crisis. And there are upcoming elections in November, right? And the greatest majority of Rohingya will not also have the right to vote as well. So what are your hopes right now in the next following months, considering this global pandemic? Is it the advocacy? Is it this sort of raising awareness? What can be done to continue this pressure? Is the court that Gambia brought up a positive one as long as it will last? What are your thoughts?
So denial of citizenship, denial of equal rights, and exclusions of identity, ethnicity, ethnic nationalities from the country's nationality list is part of the genocide, and it's one of the root cause that we have to address. So along with that, while they were able to revoke our citizenship rights, and it was easier for them to basically disenfranchise our population. 2015 was the first elections in the history that the Rohingya were not allowed to vote or take part in the elections. In my parents' or grandparents' times, they were able to take part in elections and they were able to vote. And we had ministers and parliamentarians and high-level officials in the governments. Now we have nothing, and we're not even allowed to vote in our generations. And this is a man-made disaster, and it is a man-made problem, and that has to be done by the people in Myanmar. And this can only be happen when we have enough support from the world, from the UN, from governments, and from public around the world. And this can be happen. Even if China is backing up Myanmar, it doesn't mean that this is not going to happen. We need to have a faith. As I said, this is a man-made problem, and we can solve it. We need political will. We need to push the governments. We need to write letters to the senators and congressmen and women, and we need to talk to the government. We need to talk to the media. Yes, advocacy and campaignings are required, important. At the same time, we also need the community development building, empowering the community, building a stronger and resilient populations. Given my own example, because I have a chance to rejoin my educations when I was released from the jail, I was able to go to the law school and learn educations, and I have a voice now. I'm empowered and I have a voice now. I can give voice, and I can, basically, represent the community to address this seem to be complicated issue in a way that is not complicated. There is a hope and there is a solutions. I can guide the people, and we need many more like that. We need a stronger populations. We need stronger community, and we need support. So that's why I believe community building should be part of it. And then we need advocacy and policy change, campaign and awareness as well. So to be able to build a community, we need to support the community members, individuals directly. Now, you may aware that many governments use millions of dollars, billions of dollars to support refugees and let's say even the Rohingya. But then many of those support are not being used effectively to build a strengthened resilience populations, to make them independent and stronger populations. Most of this money has been used as for the service providing programs or humanitarian support. Yes, humanitarian support is the most important, but what we need for a sustainable and long-lasting solution is education, skill-based programs, and the programs that allow them to be able to become independent in terms of financially or from other manner. That's what we are needed at this point, building a stronger resilience community. That's how we will be able to address. And therefore now I'm starting a new initiative called Inclusive Futures, where we will be providing scholarship, giving a second chance to the refugee students or IDP student. When I was locked up in the prison, I realized I lost my future. But then when I had a second chance, I become someone is capable of doing things and helping people, not for my community, but also communities around us in my country and around the globe. So that's why we need to give these kids, younger generations, a second chance. So my programs, the organization's Inclusive Futures, will be providing scholarship for online education. Since they don't have universities for themselves in the camps, we can still give them education. There is a lot of availability and access to the knowledge and educations online out there. We need to give them we need to assist them to be able to enroll and be able to access, by providing them scholarships and providing trainings, vocational trainings and leadership trainings. At the same time, bringing connections to one another, building leadership network among the minorities as well as the majority populations in the countries, so that we build relationship, trust, and mutual understanding among the groups, and eventually build respect and address our underlying causes and root causes, with the aim to overcome from persecutions and discrimination. So join me in my new initiative, Inclusive Futures.
Thank you so much for sharing information on your new professional endeavors. That sounds so great. And as early as you give me more information, maybe for website or more concrete information available online, I will also use it to share as well. And you are a force. I told you that for good, and I'm so grateful that you are out there to be a role model through your own leadership. And your organization continually not only documents like others these ongoing human rights abuses, but you also offer new visions. And that's one thing that that I admired so much and discovered when, at a time when this fighting impunity seems essential, you are also thinking about the future and how it might look like, and that is all the more admirable. And one of the things that I very much appreciated was learning about one project that Women Peace Network launched, called "We Used to Have Picnics Together: Memories of Friendship and Peace Among Rohingya and Rakhine Women in Rakhine State, Myanmar." Could you tell us just a little bit more about it? I learned that one of the goals was to demonstrate how the memories of stories of Rohingya and Rakhine women reflect this interconnectedness historically, right? Can you tell us just a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So through Women Peace Network, we document the situations in Rakhine State and situations of women throughout the country, like situations being specifically violence against women, and human rights violations against Rohingya and in general. So we often come up with the policy briefers and submission to the, let's say, UN or other entities, and at the same time we also do a few public reporting for the public awareness, and with the aim to reflect on the crisis as well as build move forward from the status quo we have. So that's the project. So one of the report is that we used to have picnic together. As far as I remember, living in Rakhine State in Myanmar, we have friends from all communities. We went to the school together. We were friends and we go out together, and most of the time we had no problems before the government introduced divide and rules. Even when in the times of divide and rules, there are people, engaging, communicating and having relationships. So in this report, we try to document the memories of the women from both Rohingya and Rakhine Buddhist community, and come up with a beautiful report saying, with their own words, with their women voices, reflecting their life, their childhood, their school time, and life before these violence attack in 2012, life before they become internally displaced person. So we document, we interview Rakhine women in Rakhine State, and we interviewed Rohingya women in Rakhine State as well as in Bangladesh and in Malaysia. So we track all the way back, how women and men were together, and they were basically they shared their memories and their life and their activities, economic activities to school activities, women sharing among each other, stuff like that. And it was beautiful. And what they were missing is their peaceful life together. As a human nature, it is obvious that there are speculating and propaganda saying that Rakhine Buddhists hate Rohingya. But it's not that these people who hate each other. It's the system that forced us to hate each other. And we want to discover the humanity, the deep downside of the people feeling. And that was one of the report that we were able to come up. And at the Women Peace Network, we do women educations and empowerment program beside the peace building. And we also do like advocacy and campaigning.
That is very powerful, Wai Wai. I am looking forward to all the amazing things that you will keep on doing to empower women and youth and to fight for human rights of Rohingya. And that said, this leads me to the part of the podcast which I called 5 Sweet Questions, where I ask you things about you because I want our listeners to get to know you, not just as this powerful leader and force, but a little bit more about you, who you are behind the scenes. So the first question would be, once the current emergency is over, I'm referring to pandemic right now, is there anything that you would not want to forget?
Yeah, that's a tough question actually. Actually, I feel like I am able to connect with more people, like in different continent now than ever, because I feel like I have suddenly more time than before, and I don't have to travel that much. In the past, I traveled all over the world, like monthly basis or sometimes by weekly basis. Like I'm in one continent to another continent. But now I save those travel times, so I am able to communicate with people. I've been able to talk with many of our volunteers and members in Rakhine, in the camps, and my families and family members and cousins, and ever since they have been out there, I have the most the most time at this point to be able to talk and communicate directly one on one, and that has been very beautiful. I think I'll be able to manage to maintain that level of communication to everyone. I mean, we need it. So that's one thing. Otherwise, maybe I have more time to I don't know, eat proper food at home. Otherwise, we just end up eating from junk food, or from restaurant or stuff like that. I am very fortunate to be with a Burmese friend's house. The family is so kind and so nice. They make food every day, and I'm really privileged to enjoy their house, and the food and the love and the kindness and activities together. I think I'm gonna miss them.
That's great. Seems like the best one can want now, that care of the community. And so the second question is, which of your personality traits has been the most useful, Wai Wai? Like not your best, but your most useful trait. What do you think?
I think I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it's optimism, or like yeah. So I don't. Okay, I don't get upset with the people easily, and I don't mind people for a small thing, small mistake. I don't even care, and I only care the big mission and big one. So maybe that's the optimism. I don't know how to describe it. I think that's because you have so many struggle in life, so much since you're young. If you take everything seriously, like if you will be suffer from many challenges. It will be hard to overcome. Sometimes you need to trade off, what to prioritize. And I think I'm good at that, although it might be difficult sometimes when you have so many challenges and problems and hardship, but you need to find a way to overcome from it. And I think like that, I don't know, maybe that's resilience. I don't know. How do you put that?
Psychologists would say that optimism is definitely one element of it. So you touched a little bit upon it, but so my third question is, I know you're so busy and now time is relative, but when you have 30 minutes of free time, like if you were able to control your time, how do you pass that time?
I would want to finish becoming. I started
the documentary or the book?
The book. I started it, but I haven't finished it yet. So yeah, I would love to read the book that I love, or I would love to go out for a walk.
The fourth question, what skill or craft would you like to master, to get good or better at?
I think cooking. Yeah, so I never wanted to cook because I thought it was extra work in our life. But now I started to realize when you're able to cook, first of all, you will be able to get the you will be able to eat well with good food. At the same time, I also started to realize, food make people happy. When you give them good food, people will appreciate from their heart. So maybe, I don't know, I want to become a better cook and feed the people that I love.
That's beautiful. I look forward to, safe safety so that I could have you over. I think right now we're close by geographically.
I don't know how to cook yet, so I'll try.
I'll cook. We'll exchange some recipes. So last question. Are any of your friends completely opposite to you, or are most of them similar to you?
I think most of them are similar. If there are opposites. There are some people like opposite to me, and even in my own family. If they're very opposite to me, if they're very close to me and important people to me, I choose to help them. But if they're very opposite and they're not very close to me, I try to avoid them. So yeah, there are some friends that are totally opposite to me, but sometimes if they're not important, close in my life, and I would try to avoid them.
That's great. Thank you for these answers as well. This, I think, brings us towards the end of our conversation. Before we sign off, I want to ask you, Wai Wai, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners, whether for pandemic coping or anything that continues to inspire you that you would just want to share with the world?
I believe human beings naturally love, human dignity and being human. And I would like to request everybody, to see each and every one of us with the same eyes that you on. Basically promoting, like having empathy towards each other and helping if you can. Because when I was, one day I asked my dad, his life has been very difficult. He passed all this rough life and even bringing the whole family to the prison. And he came out, he continued to work on the mission that would bring justice and peace and equality for his people and in the country. But yet the journey is not easy. Sometimes he can be criticized, or it may put him at risk of life in danger. And I asked one day that while I was started working on my own activism, Dad, why do you continue this work? You are already old, and maybe you should just stop and, take rest and read book at home and, stay relax. And his response to me was that I am in a better position than many other people around me. And I'm doing this not for rewards or to gain anything, but to help the people who need my help. So if you can, what I would like to request is that if you can help others that are vulnerable than you, and show some empathy and, respect.
Thank you so much, Wai Wai, for, again, finding the time, sharing all those amazing insights from your professional endeavors and personal experiences. I am honored and privileged and can't wait to have you over for dinner so that we can also hopefully discuss some positive developments on international scene regarding Rohingya. Thank you again. And to all the listeners, I urge you to go online. I will share information about Wai Wai's work and all the information that she will provide that might inform you better. Go online also and check out the amazing online exhibition on the U.S. Holocaust Museum, Memorial Museum, very powerful online exhibit that explores how the Rohingya have basically slowly went from citizens to outsiders and the escalation of things from 2017. And to everybody else, stay tuned for more guests, for more conversations. Stay well and hold tight to those you love.